About 1 year ago, I did a video where I played the original Dragon Warrior monsters, just using a single slime. It was a blast, and it's turned out to be one of my most popular videos on the channel, so I think it's about time that I dust off my DS and move up to the next reasonable step. Can I beat Dragon Quest Monsters Joker, the first game, only using a slime? Welcome everybody, and I'm Defeater of Souls, and if you're interested in Dragon Quest Monsters content, that's what I cover. Feel free to subscribe to my channel and see what else I have. So let's get started right away. There are two main criteria that are basically going to form the foundation of this run-through. The first is obvious. I'm only ever allowed to have in my active party a single slime at any time. However, there is going to be an instance in which this is going to have to be violated. I will explain when we get there. The second is what is allowed. I'm allowed to use items, synthesis, equipment. All of these things are really essential to really make sure that this run is possible. Otherwise, this wouldn't be nearly as fun or nearly as possible to do. So let's begin. Unlike previous games in the series, Dragon Quest Monster Joker does not start you off with a slime. You have to go and catch one yourself, so that's what we go ahead and do. Something I should mention right now is that I will not be going over all the story beats of this game, simply because it doesn't matter for this playthrough. So if you wanted to know what the story of this game is, go play this game. So, moving along, the first island in which we actually have to do stuff on is called Xeraphile. Xeraphile introduces us to our first boss. That boss is the Orc. The Orc is an incredibly simple encounter. All he does is physical attacks, and he'll occasionally heal himself. As a result, defeating him is also incredibly simple. As long as you make sure your HP is topped up every turn and that you're still dealing decent damage, he'll go down fairly easily. This took me about 4 attempts to do. After we beat the Orc, we're able to take his weapon, the Sacred Spear. Something I should mention is that on the right, there will be a section called Notes. This is where all of the current skills I have learned, equipment, and other useful information will be. So if I ever forget to mention something, just check over there to see if there are any updates that might have happened. The next boss is also on Xeraphile. This is the Golem. The Golem is also on the simpler side. He uses normal attacks as well, but he's also capable of raising his tension to do extra damage. At 5 tension it hurts, but at 20 tension it becomes truly devastating. So it's even more important that you keep your HP up in this fight. Besides that, once again, this is not the hardest fight. That finishes off Xeraphile, so the next fight is up against Palish Isle. So right away I decide to get myself a new slime. How do I get a new slime? Well, synthesizing it with another slime. 2 slimes together will give you another slime. It's pretty simple, so say hello to Slamiel. He has the exact same skill set as Slib did, that being Slimer and Attack Boost 1. Now, of course, we do have a small problem here, and that's the fact that we can't learn any new skills. That's because the only way to learn new skills is if I can keep a slime while synthesizing it with other things, and we do not currently have the means to do that. The first thing we have to do now here on Palish Isle, now that we have a new slime, is the Garden Trial. The Garden Trial sucks. Normally it's an easy way to just, make sure that your team is up to snuff at this point of the game. Instead, it's an annoying affair where I have to kill way too many slimes in way too short amount of time using a single monster that is fairly weak for this point of the game. I am still able to get it done though, so it's still a victory, and it allows us to move on to collect this very special item. That is the Phoenix Scepter. This is going to be the key item in this run-through. Let me explain why. Synthesis in Dragon Quest Monsters Joker is incredibly simple. If you want the monster that you have to be the same when you synthesize it with something else, you have to synthesize it with the same monster it was. That's what I did to get Slamiel. However, if you equip that monster with a Phoenix Staff, then instead you can synthesize this monster with pretty much anything, and it'll still come out exactly the same. This will allow me to edit the stats and skills of my slime without it changing what monster is. It really is going to make this whole run-through possible. So, that out of the way, we go ahead and fight the main boss of Palish Isle, the Mucifer. He absolutely slaughters me. So I realized that it's time to do some synthesis with my Phoenix Scepter that I've acquired. So I go ahead and synthesize Slamiel with the Heal Slime. This gives me Slimothy, great monster. He now has access to Healer, which is a skill set full of healing moves and also Buff. Buff is a great skill that's going to be essential for the rest of this run. I also go ahead and get rid of Slimothy, synthesize him with a Spike Tear to get Guzin. Guzin's alright. This allowed me to get Naturalist, which is a decent physical attacking skill set. It's not the best, but it'll do me alright through most of this run. We go ahead and try Mucifer again, and this time he's much easier. Using Buff does a great job of lowering his damage output, but I still gotta watch out for Boom, which can be pretty painful. The Mucifer is also capable of using Psych Up, which can be fairly dangerous if you're not careful, but if you are careful and you're able to make sure that your HP's high, it shouldn't be too much of a problem. The next island is Celestial, but before we go there, we have a lot of synthesis to do. Once again, synthesis is important, and I think I know what I want my monster to be. I'm going to have him be a powerful physical attacker, simply because it requires less high stats in order for him to properly use it. So we go ahead and synthesize our slime with the Nardrig, and this gives us Blobby. We go ahead and give Blobby a new wife in the form of a boarfish, and that gives us Gordon. Gordon's alright, we go ahead and synthesize him with a snail slime, this gives us Zeus, and we go ahead and synthesize Zeus with another Nardragon to give us Glibson. We go ahead and synthesize Glibson with a Hunter Mech, and that gives us Spruzer. The reason why we do all this is mostly because we need his stats to increase, and this will all lean towards the physical attack and defense range. Also, throughout all those consecutive synthesis, our attack boost 1 upgraded to an attack boost 2 to further increase his attack and magic max HP. Besides that, his skill sets are all exactly the same. Before we can do too much, we have this fun little fight that I'm not supposed to win against Dr. Snap's team on Xeraphile. It's in Xeraphile, but it's part of the Celestial section, don't worry about it. This fight was hard, as in I died incredibly quickly. But what it does is it gives me a good idea that I'm not going to be ready for what is going to eventually become the hardest part of this run. We call this part foreshadowing. So, now that we lost there, let's go to a battle I will win against the Great Dragon. The Great Dragon does physical attacks along with Fire and Ice Breath, and he'll occasionally try to paralyze using Burning Breath. However, between our much higher stats and buff, we're able to reduce his physical attacks to practically nothing. Fire and Ice Breath really aren't that devastating, you just have to make sure you heal after they land, and Burning Breath's only a problem if you don't have any herbs that are capable of curing paralysis, or if you're unlucky. If you are lucky, shouldn't be a problem. So, I defeat him pretty easily. This is also further helped by the fact that Naturalist comes with Dragon Slash, and Dragon Slash does extra damage to dragons. Any guess whether or not Great Dragon's a dragon? No? Okay. Next up, we gotta move to the next island, Fertile. There is not a lot happening here, so we go ahead and fight the next boss, the Demon at Arms. Demon at Arms is also incredibly simple. He likes physical attacks. He can use Poison Poke to poison, but besides that, he just does physical attacks. If you can cure poison, then that's practically nothing, and if you're able to keep buff up at this point, no damage is going to really be dealt to you at any considerable level. The only thing you have to really worry about is if he gets a critical hit and kills you in one hit, which is the only reason why this took me 2 attempts to beat, compared to the Great Dragon's single attempt. Besides that, it's pretty simple. We go ahead and do another synthesis. This is a brownie mixed with a metal slime knight, giving us a skeleton. Now you may notice that none of those are slimes. This is mostly because I wanted the metal slime knight's item, but he was not the right charge in order to properly do synthesis. So that gives us a skeleton. We can go ahead and synthesize that with our slime to get us Oozeborn. This gives us Dark Light Slashes. Dark Light Slashes is a great offensive skill set that gives us both ice, light, and dark physical attacks. It also gives us Uncarnate, which is going to be practically useless except for a single battle later on. Now that we have Dark Light Slashes, it's time for even more training. So we go ahead and synthesize Oozeborn with a Demon Rider to get Slabby, and we go ahead and synthesize that with a Mum in order to get Flubber. Now it's time for the hardest part of this entire challenge, the Finals Tournament. This took me 13 attempts in order to complete it. Let me break it down for you. The first thing we have to mention is that we found the exception to our rule. For the finals, you are required to have 2 monsters in your party. This restriction is 100% meaningless. So what we do to get around it is we go back to the very first island and catch a level 1 slime. This slime has absolutely nothing. No skills, no skill points allocated, no weapons, nothing. It is guaranteed to die the first hit it gets, and is essential in order to do this while still having a single slime. Now that that's out of the way, let's actually talk about the finals. The finals take place over 3 consecutive waves of battles. The first one up is Slimin. Slimin is incredibly simple. The goal here is to just kill his monsters as quickly as possible while using as little MP as possible. We target the healer first, that being the Angel Slime, so that's pretty simple. Then after that we move on to the Dark Slime. The Dark Slime is capable of casting Kazamel, which can be devastating, but it's not too bad. Then we gotta kill the normal slime, which really isn't too bad. Phase 2 is where things really start stepping up in difficulty. The first guy we need to kill is the Living Statue. The Living Statue is capable of draining and stealing all of your MP, which can be devastating in a long drawn-out fight like this one. Once he's dead, we move on to the Gigantus. The Gigantus is a really painful attacker, even with buff up, so we need to make sure he dies quickly as possible while still keeping a high HP. Once the Gigantus is finally dead, the whole thing becomes a whole lot easier. We can do that by targeting the Frau, which is a dumb name, but it does the job. The Frau uses status conditions, so he really doesn't do too much if you're lucky. If you're not lucky, then you're not going to make it this far in the run anyways. But besides that, the Frau really is not that difficult. Phase 3 really also isn't that bad either. Phase 2 is really just about making sure you have enough MP to make it through this final stretch. Both of his monsters really love buffing each other up. However, only one of them is capable of healing, so you need to kill the Beetle Bully first. That is essential, otherwise you will struggle really hard. Once the Beetle Bully's dead, it's pretty easy going from there. If you have buff, Oomph won't be enough to deal any damage to you. So now we can move on to the true final fight, which involves this awesome scene that just happened. I sure love when that dog gets drop-kicked. And we can finally move on to elsewhere in our lovely story, and move on to the next boss before we get to the final dungeon. Belial. Belial, I honestly keep forgetting that Belial exists. He is an incredibly easy boss. Belial does really simple stuff, as in he uses magic attacks to deal damage, very rarely, and he uses physical attacks to deal damage, which don't do anything if you have buff up. So it's pretty clear what we do from this point on. You use buff to keep yourself from dealing damage, while dishing out physical attacks back towards them, and you make sure you heal constantly. This is going to be our strategy for pretty much the rest of the game. Now, endgame time. The first boss we fight in the endgame here at the lovely place of Tartarus is the Ace of Spades. The Ace of Spades is an incredibly simple fight. The Ace of Spades mostly uses dark attacks, but physical attacks still aren't going to do anything due to how high a defense Flubber has. Plus, combine that with buff, it's nothing to worry about. What we do need to worry about is his Kazam. Well, it's just normal Kazam. Whatever it is, it hurts. It hurts really bad, so you need to make sure your HP is still topped up so it doesn't kill you. He also infrequently uses Wave of Panic, but as long as you keep buff up, it really shouldn't matter too much. Next boss we have to fight is probably the easiest boss at this point in the game, that being Atlas. Atlas really only does physical attacks. So as you can imagine, buff, heal, kill. That's it. Try and conserve your MP because you have to fight Atlas every single time you run through the dungeon to fight the final boss again, but besides that, it's pretty easy going. While this fight's going on in the background, I should mention that there are a couple other boss fights in the final dungeon that I could have fought, but they're completely optional, so I just decided that what I got from them wasn't worth the effort it would take to actually fight them. So, moving on from those guys, we move on to a boss that is required, that actually being the combo of Mohawker and Buffalo Ogre. The Buffalo Ogre is a one-trick pony. He raises his tension and uses normal attacks. On the contrary, the Mohawker has a lot more diverse skills, but none of them are really worrisome except for his one magic attack that he never uses. Either way, just out of threat alone, you kill the Mohawker first, and then just make sure you don't get bowled over by the Buffalo Ogre. Keeping up buff is probably a good idea too, depending on how stacked the slime is at this given time. At this point, we're doing pretty well, but I don't think we're good enough to fight the final boss, mostly because I fought the final boss with Flubber and died, so it's time for us to take some drastic measures. By synthesizing Flubber with a Dragon, we get a slime with a lot more HP, and this is going to be the slime that wins us our run. Say hello to Jelgamez. And with that, Jelgamez gets nice amount of training, only about 42 levels work, and yes, that took about as much time as you thought, especially remember that I cannot kill a metal slime with a single slime in reasonable conditions, so let's fight the final boss. As a final boss, Dr. Snapped is on the simpler end. He comes with two allies, that being the Demon at Arms and the Tortured Soul. In this run, we want to kill the Tortured Soul as quick as possible, due to the fact that he uses status conditions and other weakening moves, the main one in question being Magic Frailty. This makes it so that we're vulnerable to magic, which Dr. Snapped has in spades, and if comboed with Dr. Snapped's Kazamel, it will kill our slime in a single hit, regardless of how high his HP is. So we kill the Tortured Soul first. The Demon at Arms uses only physical attacks. He acts twice per turn, he hits hard. However, if you have buff, or if you've trained as high as my guy is, this will basically be nothing, so we can ignore him for the rest of the battle. That leaves the big man himself, Dr. Snapped. He is capable of healing physical attacks in both Kazamel and Kaboomel, and he can also use Disruptive Wave. Strategy here is pretty simple. If he uses Disruptive Wave, reapply buff as quick as possible and heal if needed. If he uses normal attacks, ignore them as long as you have buff up, and if they're not, then reapply buff and heal as needed. If he uses Kaboomal, then you're gonna want to heal. If he uses Kazam, stop everything and use as many items and whatever to get yourself back up to full HP. Because of how much that does, you never want to be below half HP. Once Dr. Snapped dies, we can finally finish off the Demon at Arms, and like that, we have beaten the game. So, as the credits roll, let's talk about the actual stats of our slime in this lovely challenge run. Our final slime was Gelgamez. His skill set was Healer, which he got from the Heal Slime way back when, Dark Light Slashes, which he got from Metal Slime Knight, who gave it to a skeleton, and Attack Boost 3, which he obtained from his most recent synthesis when our good pal Flubber synthesized with a Dragon. He also has Sacred Talons as a weapon, although throughout most of the game I used Spears as a weapon, mostly because Spears did the most damage in the area I was in, simply because options. Those were the options I had. When it comes to stats, his highest stat was easily his attack stat. It sat around the 476 range. His lowest stat was both agility and wisdom. They are around 318, but all his stats were over 300. It is important not just to do synthesis, but a lot of training in order to properly do this. Getting over leveled is always a reliable way to win any challenge run with a single guy, but considering how it was a slime, and, you know, for the fun of the challenge, I didn't want to get him too high, but 42 may have been pressing the limit of how high a level it should have been. So that is pretty much all we have for this video. So, thank you all for watching. If you're interested in Dragon Quest Monsters content, that's what I cover. Feel free to subscribe to my channel, and if you like the video, leave a like on this video. Something I should say is that if you're a fan of challenge runs, well, I've done a handful in other games, so if you want to see some other Dragon Quest Monsters challenge runs, I've linked a playlist in the description where I've done all the ones I've done there. If you want one that specifically takes place in Joker, this is my first one that I've done, so if you want another Joker challenge, I'd suggest watching this video by MC Hawaii. I'll also link it into the description. It's pretty interesting and it's pretty well done, so yeah, definitely go on and check it out if you haven't already. That all being said, let's move on to the question of the every other week. Last time I asked a question, and if you don't remember, that's okay, it was at the end of a 45-minute long video. That was honestly my bad. Let's make this a little simpler. See, I mentioned earlier that in the final dungeon of Dragon Quest Monsters Joker, that there were two optional bosses that you could fight, but I chose not to. Do you know what those two bosses are? If you call out even a single one and you get it right, you will get a shout out in the next video. Sounds like something you can do? Go ahead and give it your best shot. That's pretty much all I got, so thank you all very much for watching, and this has been Defeater of Souls.